now I want to discuss maybe an important topic from this year's point of view, because there has been a debate in media amongst the various political parties, and leaders of certain political parties have advocated for conducting caste census in case of India. Okay. And this was something which was done and in fact advocated in case of state of Bihar as well. Okay. Now the question that pertains is something that they are going to ask you, whether caste census should be conducted in case of India or not. Now basically I will try to cover this in two dimensions. One dimension that I will be talking about is I will be giving various arguments in favor of conduct of caste census, and I will also be giving the second dimension that I will be talking about. I will also be giving various arguments which were put forward against the conduct of caste census in case of India. Okay. So we will be taking a look into both sort of arguments. Now one thing that you need to understand, that caste census basically means enumeration of various castes. Maybe if the design comes up, they might also include their socio-economic indicators, okay, level of literacy rates, employment levels, poverty concentration, IMR, MMR, various things could be included. So that will basically depend on the design of caste census. Okay, how, in what manner it will be conceptualized by the state or government. And since it has not been designed yet, so therefore we are talking about an hypothetical scenario. Now one thing that you need to understand, that caste have been counted in case of India. Caste have been enumerated. Which caste? Only the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes have been enumerated. Okay. Not other castes have been enumerated in case of India. And this scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, this leads to generation of what? Official statistics, and which becomes an input to what? National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, National Commission for Scheduled Classes, which can, on the basis of this official statistics, which can recommend, put forward various policy prescriptions that might be followed by the welfare state or the government. Okay. So caste census, the government of India, it conducts all India census for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. The same has now been demanded and advocated for OBCs and other castes in case of India. That is, there is a demand for counting and enumeration of all castes. Now, even though I have first covered arguments in favor, but first I want to talk about argument against the caste census. And the foremost argument against the caste census is that caste census was basically conducted by the British. Okay. Caste census, for example, Ghore talks about, you can write Ghore, I have not mentioned Ghore. Ghore talks about that caste census was an instrumental tool of the British, or it was a colonial policy to divide and rule the Indians. Therefore, to conduct the caste census, by conducting the caste census, we will be moving back in times. We will be following the colonial policy of divide and rule. How? Because through caste census, caste consciousness is strengthened. Okay. Caste identities are constructed. They are strengthened. So it is going to strengthen caste consciousness of India. And particular caste will see, okay, these are my employment levels, these are literacy levels, these are IMR, MMR rates, these are the social economics indicators, these are my numbers, right? If I am talking about the broad caste, these are my fellow castemen. So this is going to increase narrow casteist and feudal loyalties. It is going to augment caste consciousness in case of India. And this is something the people who are arguing against caste census advocate that this is absolutely socially divisive. This is going to what? Going to undermine our unity. It is going to widen the fault lines of Indian society. Already Indian society is so much diverse, heterogeneous, and there are so many fault lines in Indian society. You take it on the basis of language, on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of religion, and now also caste also. So it is going to what? Further fragment Indian society. It is impact our integration. And the same argument goes that since the caste identity will be strengthened, caste identity will be projected, caste identity will be advocated, caste consciousness will be getting stronger. So this is going to undermine nationalism as well, as people will be identifying themselves or mainly politically mobilized, even though it is happening also now, but they will politically mobilize in more concrete terms with more vigor on the basis of caste. So it might strengthen caste-based feudal loyalty, narrow and parochial identities will be emphasized on, and this is going to weaken the pan-India identity, the pan-India consciousness. This is going to weaken our nationalism. It is going to divide us. It is going to undermine our integration. It is going to undermine our unity. And some of the castes here you will see are regionally dominant. So this is going to increase what? Regionalism as well. Some of the caste might, just on the basis of their linguistic identity, ethnic identities, or maybe just on the basis of caste, that we are there in the one region, we are dominant here, and our caste, our linguistic identity, our ethnicity align. So therefore we are advocating for what? Separation. So it might also trigger separation and secessionism in case of India. Okay. Now since caste are increasingly going to aware of their reality, it might trigger what? Caste competition. Competition between different castes. It might trigger caste division, caste rivalry, wherein different castes in this fragmented Indian society are fighting with each other, competing with each other for limited resources. The other argument is that, and this is something which is propounded by modernist scholars. Modernist scholars argue that if you conduct caste census, what does it represent? It represents regressive, that very demand for caste census represents regressive and feudal mindset. Okay. They argue that in case of India, especially in modern India, due to the impact of globalization, due to the impact of modernization and urbanization, caste has been replaced by class. Now people have started emphasizing on their individualistic identity rather than collective or social identities. Group dynamics has given way to individual orientation, individual self-interest, which is increasing in case of modern Western urbanized India. We have moved from feudalism to capitalism. We have moved from caste to class. We are modernizing, developing, progressing. We are our society is getting more and more individualistic. Now if you do this, it means you are regressive. You are going back in time. You are undermining capitalism and strengthening feudalism in case of India, because caste race loyalties are basically feudal loyalties, narrow loyalties, parochial loyalties. You are going back in time. You are undermining everything that we have achieved so far, all the progress that we have achieved so far. And in fact, Nehru, who was the architect of modern India, he was the first one to argue that caste has no place in modern India. Caste, and he was also supported by Gunnar Myrdal, that caste constitutes a cultural barrier to India's development, modernization and progress. And by conducting caste census, you will be strengthening these very identities. Some other scholars like V.K. Nataraj argue that caste census is going to create increasing dependency of these social groups or caste on the state. And this is something that is not possible. Why? Because he argues, you see, post 1991 reforms, economic reforms, onset of liberalization, privatization and globalization, there is a steady withdrawal of state from various developmental activities. More and more privatization is happening. People are focusing on commercialization, privatization. So state is withdrawing itself. State is reiterating. We are moving from government to governance. Government is not. It is not a one actor based model of development, rather multi actor based model of development in which multiple actors are involved, in which state is basically concerned about regulation. State is a regulator and not a doer. State is a facilitator and not a doer. Therefore, more and more private entrepreneurial activity, we are talking about startup India. So more and more private entrepreneurial activity, it is done by what? It is done by what? Private individuals. Privatization is occurring. So this means that we'll be going back in time, if this caste census is conducted, it means the role of the welfare state has to be increased a lot. State's role is going to increase, its power is going to increase, the authority is going to increase, and this is something which is not desirable for a modern India. Some scholars argue that this conducting the very caste census is an administrative nightmare. Why is it an administrative nightmare? It is an administrative nightmare in the sense that that this is something which is going to it is logistically very difficult to conduct caste census, and not just that. How will you enumerate the people or children who are a product of intercaste marriages? Intercaste marriages in case of India are in the rise, especially with the dilution of caste-based identities. Caste is diluting, it is withering away, and intercaste marriages are on the rise. Now the offspring or individuals, how will you enumerate them? And how will you take into account or consideration the caste that is prevalent among non-Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians? Whether you will be enumerating those as well or not. Also, caste is known by different names in different regions. They might be caste is basically occupation based, and they might be known by different names by in different regions. Then on a more pan-India scale, how are you going to formulate their socio-economic indicators? So this is something that they argue. These are basically, this constitutes the argument against reservation. Okay. Now this is the argument against. It will strengthen caste consciousness in India. Therefore, it is socially divisive. It threatens the unity of India by widening the already existing fault lines of Indian society. To count caste is to return to the colonial era of divide and rule. It will accentuate caste divisions, caste competitions, and caste rivalry. After that, you will write, it will unleash large-scale caste-based protests and movements across India, in which different castes will be fighting for extension of reservation, extension of various welfare schemes, so for their social upliftment. And this is something Nehru argued, the caste has no place in modern India, and it constitutes a cultural barrier to India's modernization, progress, and development. Some modernist scholars argued that in contemporary India, due to impact of globalization, modernization, and urbanization, caste has been replaced by class. Collective identity, that is group identity or group or social, has been replaced by the individual or individual identity. And feudalism has given way to capitalism. Therefore, demand for caste census is driven by feudal mindset, and it is regressive in nature. Then V.K. Nataraj argues that caste census creates excessive dependence of caste on welfare state. He argues there is a steady withdrawal of state from several spheres of development post 1991 economic reforms, and thrust of development policy is towards privatization. Then some scholars argue that it is going to weaken nationalism and strengthen caste-based regional and feudal loyalties. And also some argue that this is an administrative nightmare. For example, how will you be accounting for inter-caste marriages and caste among Muslim, Sikhs and Christians in case of India? Now let us talk about arguments which were put forward in favor of conduct of caste census. The first argument that was given, that it will help in identifying as to where different castes stand in the socio-economic ladder. What are their positions? What are their current status? Which are advanced caste? Which are backward caste? Once you identify them, it will be easier for state to extend various policy interventions. For example, policy intervention in favor of caste which are backward, to uplift them. So this will ensure what? Social justice, economic justice, and this is something which is the responsibility of the welfare state. It is the responsibility of the welfare state. Through this, welfare state will be implementing what? Its directive principles and strict policy. preamble objectives and ideals like social and economic justice. So this is something which is very, very important. Okay. Now, Sukhdev Thyarat, he argues, vast sociological research have demonstrated the reality of caste-based discrimination and caste-based inequality in India. He argues, sociological research, it has pointed out that caste discrimination exists in India, caste-based inequality exists in India. Okay. And this caste-based discrimination and caste-based inequality, it should be captured in official statistics. So official statistics. This should be captured using or by through representation by numbers. Okay. Should be captured by in official statistics. It will aid the state in extending various public policy interventions to targeted social groups to ensure their upliftment and emancipation, and it will ensure social and economic justice. These are basically the duties of welfare state. It will help. It is basically comes under directive principles of state policy (DPSP), and it will also through this state will also realize or complete or fulfill its preamble objectives and ideals. Okay. Now, caste census can aid the different caste. It can help the different caste in understanding who they are, okay, where they are, and why they are there at the margin. It will basically, the point I am making here is, it will help the caste to understand their relative positions in the social precedence, in the socio-economic scheme of things, where they stand and why they are standing at the margin. Okay. It will help them in knowing their true situation. They might be subjectively experiencing marginalization, discrimination, inequality. Okay. But when you conduct caste census, it will show the mirror to society. It will capture the empirical reality, and thereby it will project or show it to the various caste-based groups. Okay, this is where I stand, and this reality is represented using concrete statistics, concrete numbers. For example, it will point out, okay, Dalits are 5 crores or OBCs are 6 crores, and these are their conditions. Okay. So it will help what? It will help in understanding their true situation. Okay. They subjectively feel marginalized, or they feel inequality, they feel poverty. What is the reason behind this poverty? So it will help in what? Subjective understanding of objective, their reality objective, they're feeling marginalized, this is an objective reality, it is a fact. But it will help in capturing this and projecting this, and this is through that these castes will understand their true situation. So this will help in what? This will ultimately help in their relative deprivation. They will feel relatively deprived in the social scheme of things. This is in the social precedence, in the social ladder of social precedence, we are placed here. Okay. Thereby they will start advocating for what? They will start advocating for their rights. They will start advocating for social justice. Okay. And this will continue to contribute to what? Their emancipation, their upliftment. They can pressurize the state to follow various policy prescription, targeted interventions, and to follow and meet its constitutional duties and obligations, which are being put on welfare states. Okay. So it will cognitively empowers it. Cognitively, it is a kind of form of consciousness. They will know of their true situation. It cognitively empowers the lower caste to understand and assess their true situation. It helps the tormented mass in approximating their social experience to concrete numbers. For example, 5 crore Dalits. These are concrete numbers. Caste census tends to generate among the socially deprived sections a feeling of relative deprivation, which is based on their objective experience. So it will help in what? Subjective understanding of objective reality. And this is a kind of a form of that Karl Marx argue, class for itself and class in itself. So class in itself becomes class for itself. So through this, the caste in itself will become caste for itself. You can write that, right? It is very catchy. ठीक है. And these scholars argue that we cannot be caste blind. We cannot wish away the reality of caste. ठीक है. सतीश देशपांडे argues that there is a notion of caste blindness is there. अगर आपने सुना होगा कि ये कहावत है, ठीक है, कि कबूतर जब बिल्ली को देखता है तो अपनी आंखें बंद कर लेता है. तो उसको लगता है कि जैसे आंखें बंद कर लेता है, so it means it has become blind, it has switched off the reality, so that pigeon will think that the danger has gone. This is not the case. We should confront our problems head on. Caste is a problem in case of India, and this is something that Satish Deshpande argues. You cannot be driven by notion of caste blindness. If you want to create a casteless society, if you want to abolish caste, if you want to annihilate caste, you need to first recognize caste. दुश्मन को खत्म करना है तो पहले उसको रिकॉग्नाइज करो, उसको पहचानो. You want to fight your enemy, you need to identify it. You need to recognize it. So you recognize caste. You count caste, and thereby you can counter caste. Thereby you can eliminate caste. Thereby you can abolish or annihilate caste. ठीक है. So this is something that Satish Deshpande argues. That Satish Deshpande argues that a nation suffers from caste blindness. There is no way of moving from a caste-ridden present. Present is caste-ridden. Caste is a reality in case of India. To a, let's say, utopian society, to a casteless future without confrontation with the beast. This is not best. This is beast, right? Just missing one single A completely changes the meaning of the word, right? It is not best, it is beast. ठीक है. So, in order to abolish and annihilate caste, we need to recognize it, we need to count it, and thereby we need to confront it. So, he argues that caste census is just the messenger. It will depict reality. ठीक है. There is nothing wrong with caste census. So this is something that we understood. That caste census can also help in identifying the caste class linkages in case of India, in Indian society, and point toward concentration of poverty among lower caste. Now this is a kind of a fact, but this has not been well established, because we have already only talked about concentration of poverty among SCs and STs. What about the extremely backward sections of the society? There are extremely backward sections within the OBC category is very broad. Even within the OBCs, there are extremely backward sections. Okay. So how will you, it will help in assessing the linkage between caste and class. When you will enumerating caste, talking about socioeconomic indicators, through this you can trace, okay, these caste, their socioeconomic, this particular caste, caste ABC, their socioeconomic indicators is abysmal. It is very poor. So through this word you will be able to identify how caste and class are linked in case of India. How class has not replaced to caste, rather caste is shaping class in case of India. How there is a concentration of poverty among the few lower castes, SCs, STs, among the extremely backward sections of the broad category of OBCs. So this is something which is going to be, this is something which it is going to aid, and it will help in, it will aid in subcategorization. Now a Justice Rohini Commission was formed by the government. Its mandate was to give a report on subcategorization of OBCs. Okay. What is that? Is in OBCs you should subcategorize. Okay. What was the aim? That let's say particular caste within OBC, they have monopolized the reservation benefits. Okay. Thereby what? Crowding out the other communities. Other communities are being left out. Some certain dominant OBC communities are monopolizing the benefits of reservation, due to which other who are fully deserving, extremely backward sections of the OBC, they are not able to tap into these benefits of reservation. So there was an increasing demand. What for what? You categorize, further subcategorize. There is one broad category of OBCs, you further subcategorize it, so that this is what? A quota within a quota. This is a sub quota. once we will be sub-categorizing it. Okay. Let's say particular caste deserves this much is their population, and these are the socio-economic indicators, and they should deserve at least this much point. For example, from 27% reservation, they will at least deserve 2% reservation. Okay. So this is a kind of sub-categorization. Now, how will it be possible to implement this report without knowing the caste numbers? How will you be able to extend? Without official statistics, without caste numbers, caste statistics, how will you be able to subcategorize the OBCs? You need to count all the OBCs. You need to count the particular caste within the OBCs, their numbers, their socio-economic status. Only then you will be able to extend through this caste census, you will be able to ensure the implementation of this subcategorization. So through this, what will happen? That some castes which have been wrong, there are some castes which are affluent, which are dominant, they have been wrongly included within the fold of OBCs. Once you have caste numbers, it will ensure that these castes will be eliminated from the OBC categories, and some very deserving caste, they have been left out. They have not been extended OBC status, and they are backward, socially, educationally, economically backward, and they do deserve to be included in the OBC list. So wrongful inclusions and wrongful exclusions can be counted through caste statistics. Okay. So since this is something which is argued that aid in subcategorization. Now first, within this you will be writing, Justice Rohini Commission, it was found with the task of subcategorization of OBCs, but it is impossible to implement it without any caste numbers or statistics. Okay. Then detailed caste-wise data is necessary to avoid or correct wrongful inclusions of undeserving caste and wrongful exclusions of deserving caste. It will guard against few dominant castes in a reserve category, crowding out other deserving caste who are extended as OBC status but not able to tap into this OBC reservations, because this has been completely monopolized by few dominant caste, and therefore it is leading to crowding out of other deserving caste. It holds a mirror to society, can factually counter the wrongful assertions of various dominant caste. Now, various dominant caste across the entirety of India, Jats, Marathas, Patidars, they have been fighting for extension of OBC status to them. So once this caste census will be there, it will hold a mirror to society. Okay, this is a mirror. So it can, since everything is fuzzy now, everything is vague, everything is ambiguous. Okay? So this will capture the reality in a more concrete manner through statistics, through data, through numbers. So this can completely delegitimize the claims of these communities and thereby completely douse the fire of their caste movements, caste protests. Therefore, it is not going to increase caste movement and protest, which was argued in arguments against, but it is going to decrease caste movements. This is something that these scholars argue. It holds a mirror to society, can factually counter the wrongful assertions of various dominant castes in form of protest movements asking for extension or reservation, can completely delegitimize their claims. Now, how you should be concluding it? See, you don't know how the caste census is going to pan out. Now you can personally belong to either spectrum. Arguments for, arguments against, both are, see, all these arguments are valid. They are logically correct. This is also a very logical, arguments against are very logical arguments, especially the divisions it is going to promote. It will undermine nationalism and unity of our nation. And also these are also very valid arguments. In fact, they argue this is going to strengthen nationalism. By this is going to abolition, ultimately it will lead to abolition of caste. Once social justice is ensured, it will lead to abolition of caste, it will strengthen unity, it will drowse the relative deprivation. So both arguments could be, arguments are logical. But I will be saying that let's see how caste census will be unfolding, because caste census is going to unleash what? Latent and manifest consequences, which will have both functions as well as dysfunctions. So this could be a conclusion. Caste census unleash latent and manifest consequences which will both functions and dysfunctions. Okay. So let's say how will there be any political consensus among different political parties, amongst the academics, amongst the intellectuals, among the civil society activists, and among the different sections of our society, whether they want to go ahead with the caste census or no.